thing. All right, let's go. Ask me about Star Wars Squadrons or Operation Ace.
Welcome to UPLINK. We're jazzing things up at the UPLINK podcast. We rebranded the show. We're doing all Star Wars video games. We're covering Battlefront. We're covering Squadrons. We're covering Lego Star Wars. Doing the whole gamut, past, present, future. Super excited. And today, joined by a friend of the podcast, Bombastic. Andrew, how are you doing?
Hey, Sage. How's it going, man? It's good to be here. Thanks once again for having me on. I'm excited to take part.
It's always great having you on the podcast. Let's jump right in. Let's talk about Squadrons and Operation Ace. So Operations Ace was the world's first Star Wars Squadrons esports event. And my goodness, it was so legit. Like, what?
It was, some of the most fun I think I've ever had in a Star Wars game. Some of the most competitive fun anyway. I've had like so little or basically no experience playing esports, let alone Star Wars esports. Not sure they even exist, perhaps apart from speedrunning.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Being able to participate in this, the excitement, the thrill of the event, was like 5 hours long of just playing Squadrons straight, trying to accumulate the most wins and go for other accolades. It was really intense and entertaining, and so glad to have you on my team, man. Lots of fun.
It was great to be a part of that. So growing up, we always played, like, we had a GameCube growing up, so we played Super Smash Bros, Mario Kart. Yes, Mario Kart. Don't challenge me to a game though, Eckhart's.
I know, right? Please no. I'm good.
We grew up in that world, and when we moved to Colorado, we got involved in the Super Smash Bros scene.
Oh, sweet.
So we would go to local tournaments. There was a local Hastings here, and we played some tournaments there. My brother actually got, I think, second place on one, and then the next one we went to, he got, I think one time he did get first place.
Damn, so he was pretty hardcore then.
He is very good. Basically, if there's a video game, he can be good at it, like very good at it.
Wow. That's exciting. Damn.
Yeah, I'm nowhere near that level. But it was super fun to be able to get back into that world, especially since Star Wars has never really had, at least to my knowledge, an esports game. And like you said, speedrunning, I think, is the only equivalent.
Yeah, potentially. I don't know. I'm thinking maybe like any of the old Jedi games, like the Jedi Knight games. Did they have any sort of esports? I don't think so, though.
I don't
from
think
memory.
so either.
So I want to get Star Wars Racer. Can we get an esports version of Star Wars Pod Racer? That I feel like I take every possible opportunity to mention Star Wars Racer because it's one of my all-time favorite Star Wars games, and I just love it so much.
Oh, definitely.
So I'm always name dropping around it, but that would be amazing. Get a pod racing experience. Hey, can we get Motive to make a pod racing game now? A first-person VR pod racing experience. That's the next.
Yeah.
That's next level. Forget Squadrons. Let's go with that.
Or you know who would be really good at a game like that?
Criterion. Is that who you're going to say?
Yes.
True.
Could you imagine
the Starfighter Assault? Didn't they? They built all the vehicles for Battlefront 2, and they do the Need for Speed games as well, don't they?
They do. And they have such a way of like nailing the feel of a vehicle. I think they could do super well with like a pod racer, making it like super volatile. Like
amazing.
If you barely scrape something up, it could explode at any moment.
That's so true. Hey, I mean, that's one part of what we love about Squadrons, designed by Motive, of course, but it's like the collisions in that game feel, your ship has a real tangibility to it, and just bouncing off, space asteroids and whatever else is part of the experience.
Getting completely demolished by the rocks.
Yeah. I mean, but even the original Star Wars Racer game, going back and playing that now, each pod has its own feel, and the way they kind of drag and, sway side to side and you're able to control them. They don't feel anything like a car, which I think is what's so unique about that game. They actually feel like you're driving or, riding a pod racer.
Yeah.
And that is what makes it stand out and still hold up today. So updated version, let's get Motive on the VR side of things. Let's get Criterion to build the vehicles. I'm game. Let's do it.
That should definitely be the next game. And later on in the episode, we will be talking about the future of Star Wars game and how Squadrons affects that. But the next thing I want to talk about, talking about gameplay and the feel of Squadrons and Star Wars games and the Pod Racer game. How do you overall feel about the gameplay of Squadrons?
Honestly, it's something I hadn't had much experience with until I started playing. I'd never played any flight sim games, really. I'd never used a HOTAS joystick or anything like that. And I guess most of my piloting experience had either come from playing a game like GTA 5, where can get into different airplanes and ships and stuff, or Starfighter Assault, or the Star Wars Racer game. So going into this and knowing that you're locked into first person, you're having that immersive cockpit experience, it was really fresh and unique for me, and something I hadn't really had experience with before. That said, it did take quite a bit of time to get used to it. I remember having these initial feelings during the playtest before the game had been released, and just feeling like it's really cool. And I love the fact that, they're trying to give you this really immersive experience just sitting in the cockpit, and you're kind of bound to that, and you have such a limited field of view as a result of that. But once you get the hang of it, it really becomes super satisfying. I predominantly play as the bomber class as well.
Yep.
So my ship is generally quite slow. There's been a few times where I've played in a bomber for hours, and then suddenly I'll jump in like an interceptor, like an an A-wing or a TIE interceptor. And it's just like such a speed and maneuverability jump that I'm like, oh my gosh, this game is actually really fast and, intense when you're flying one of these ships. So I think they've done a great job of creating a unique feel for each vehicle in each class. And that is especially obvious in VR, when you're actually able to look around the cockpit and, be in the space of the cockpit. That is where this game really, picks up, and it is just really strong, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Really exciting.
I remember jumping, my first initial reaction before I got first reaction open up the game, like, goodness gracious, I love the aesthetic of the game. I love the vibe of it. But when I jumped into a game, it's so frustrating right off the bat, because it has such high skill level or skill floor. Like, immediately you are in a game. Like, I was trying to play it like I was playing Starfighter Assault, and I think that is definitely the wrong way to jump into Star Wars Squadrons. Like, it's completely different. Like, there is no really correlation besides some inspiration between the two. But like you said, there's such satisfaction.
It's kind of has like a real, once you learn the skills and you just spend a bit more time with each ship, or even just choose one of the specific classes and kind of stick with it, I think that's when you can really start to get the benefits of, playing this game and feel each ship, because just understanding kind of how all the different components and customization options work as well is such a big part of this. And, that's what's going to improve your experience. I've been pretty much playing the same class for about a week now. Just this bomber class. It's like this real big, heavy bomber. It takes a lot of damage. It's really slow, but is capable of also dealing heavy damage to capital ships, and kind of just learning how to play that one specific way, I found has really vastly improved my experience of this game, because it's locked me into learning how to do that one thing really well. And from there, I'm going to be like, okay, well, maybe I could add this different component and try this out, and then, add this different customization option. And then maybe I'll try fly this different ship and, take on a different role. But yeah, sticking with that ship, I think, has really improved my fun with this game. And one other thing I wanted to say, like, I've kind of tried to balance my playtime between playing with friends and playing on my own. And I use the time on my own to kind of figure out how to improve kind of very specific things that I just want to like focus on in the moment. Do you know what I mean? It's like in that moment, I just want to focus on how does this one rocket work, or how does this one component work? And then I take that into a match with my friends when you're in a squad of 5, and actually, experience it in the context of a team. And that, combining those two elements, has made this experience more enjoyable for me. Because it's supposed to be played as a team game, and I think that's really where it shines, and where it, you get the most out of it.
Yeah, like you, I have found the bomber and love the bomber. Like, I don't think so. The majority of the time during the tournament, I think there were only a few times where we specifically planned out to where one person was certain class and we like planned out our squad a few times like that. But the rest, like if I'm just going into a random lobby, I'm going to pick the bomber because I just love the way it feels. I can get better control of things. I still am learning the ropes in terms of maneuverability and getting the hang of boosting and charging up the shields and charging up the engines and the weapons and all of that. But overall, love the feel of the game. Like it's so satisfying. Like we said, it rewards you for trying different things and trying to be good at a specific thing. And then getting into the realm of customizations and making sure like, hey, the kind of bomber that I want to play can be drastically different depending on what I equip my bomber with. So I think that's something that we may get into in future episodes. But going forward, I want to talk about kind of what they've talked about with continued support. So originally they launched the game. They said, hey, this is going to be like a game in the 90s. You're going to pay $40 and you're going to get the game. That's it. Now that we've gotten the game, there have been a huge outcry for continued support. Originally in an interview with Upload VR, Ian Fraser has confirmed that the team is not treating Squadrons as a live service, which is a huge shame. He says, we don't want to say it's almost done and then dribble out more of it over time, which to be honest is how most games work these days. So we've tried to treat it in kind of an old school approach, saying you've paid $40, this is the game, and it's entirely self-contained. We're not planning to add more content. This is the game, and we hope you understand the value proposition, which is a huge shame. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a shame. I'm not sure how big the community outcry for more content has been in terms of numbers, because obviously you see a couple people and, suddenly that equates to just a very vocal minority, possibly.
Well, you do have Sam
really
Witwer, who is a huge voice. He has gone to Twitter and promoted that he would love more content, and he's a huge voice.
Yeah, I retweeted that actually. That's true. That's very true. The game honestly deserves it from a personal perspective. I'd love to see more content in the game. Yes, they've taken a very old school approach with this and have never really written it off. Like, I think Ian Fraser's been very transparent about saying that, yes, there are no current plans, 100% there's no current plans, and this is a standalone. You buy the game, you got the game. But, they don't want to rule that out because anything's possible. And if the game were to outperform sales expectations, which is something I'm really curious to see. Definitely. Every quarter, EA has their, what are they called? The earnings calls with all the investors, where the EA executives share how much the company has profited, how they're doing, how EA, how many copies they've sold of each game. So when the one comes out for the quarter Squadrons was released in, I'm really curious to see how many people have actually gone and bought this game. They were estimating, I think, 3 to 4 million people. For comparison, Jedi Fallen Order, they were estimating 6 to 8 million copies sold. And that game ended up selling about 10 million in 3 months or in that quarter. So fingers crossed this game will do similar, overwhelm their expectations, and we'll get more content. It's interesting as well, I think, how similar this actually is to some of those old X-Wing and TIE Fighter games from the 90s. In the weeks leading up to Squadron's release, I'd never played those games, and I went back and played them, and they do have like an even steeper learning curve than Squadrons. They're obviously much older games, much more difficult, much less accessible to the modern gamer. Even to back then, I was only real young back then, but I can't imagine having played those games. And it's interesting how many elements, from the briefing rooms to being in first person only, to some of the cockpit controls, to even the mission objectives. The inspiration that's been taken from these games is, Squadrons is basically a slightly more accessible, updated version of those old X-Wing and TIE Fighter games.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it channels them very well. So I'm like you and like a lot of people, a lot of creators, we're super curious to see how well it performs. I mean, from a critic's perspective, it's doing very well. IGN gave it an 8 out of 10. Our podcast, the last episode, I had friend of the podcast, Split Screen, and Ethan on, and we gave our ratings, and combined, we gave it an 8.16. So we got it around that point. Very specific. Yeah, so we each gave it our ratings, and then I combined them and divided them by 3. And 8.16 is what we came to.
That's cool. Damn.
It's a really good game. Like, critically, it's doing very well. I will say there is a sad... it's sad to see a vocal minority equate the release of Squadrons and the end of Battlefront 2. Like, games don't get made in a couple months. Like, this game was in production since Battlefront 2 launched, or before, and we're getting around 3 years here. So they've been developing the game for at least 2 years.
I didn't actually know that. I know there was a lot of talk, or like people were like commenting, saying basically that this game was rushed, and this game was just EA, they're trying to get out another Star Wars game kind of thing. You know, it's a broken, rushed game, and the game has launched, as lots of you probably know, it does have several bugs and has had a few issues in the launch. I've experienced a few. I've had a few crashes, a few other issues. Those are being sorted with some patches that are dropping into the game. But I don't think it's fair to say that this is just like, you know, pencil pusher kind of like, let's just get another game out and earn some cash, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
This is an authentic, very, very... It's a very kind of, yes, much more niche Star Wars game than perhaps Battlefront or even Jedi Fallen Order, but it's an experience that, you know, is so well worth the development cost and time and has delivered such a unique experience like we've never had before. The fact the entire game is in VR is, you know, astounding. And if you have the VR headset, or even if you don't have one, I'd even recommend getting one for this, because it's such a unique experience that you've never had. You've definitely never had this.
100%.
Yeah.
Before we get into Squadrons and the scope of like continuation of Star Wars games, one thing I want to note is the correlations between Battlefront 2 and Squadrons. There's one clear one, and that was with Starfighter Assault, and how when it came out, it was a super solid game. Gameplay was great. The feel of the vehicles were awesome, but then there was no support, and that game mode died. And now we're in the same position where we've got Squadrons. Great game, great gameplay. All of the vehicles feel fantastic, but no support. So it'll be interesting to see how that lack of support affects the game going forward in the community. I think it's difficult to expect a game in 2020 and the way games are made now to have a game come out and not have any support and then still be viable as a community later on. So it'll be interesting to see that.
I agree. But that said, Squadrons has such a, you know, so much more depth than Starfighter Assault.
Oh, definitely.
So much more customization, such a deeper combat system. You know, the different classes all feel different. The teamwork, you know, Starfighter Assault never had this kind of teamwork and this kind of coordination required. So, I don't know. Like, you could compare the two in terms of saying, yeah, then neither were supported after launch. But at the same time, I think Squadrons, especially if it develops a strong esports community, or even like just a competitive community, even if it's not necessarily termed as esports. If the competitive side of this game is, I think, why it's so such a memorable experience playing it, and you know, getting together. Like I said, you need to play this with friends. Getting together with a squadron of friends, or even just people you find online. Like if you're in a Discord server and you join up with some people in there, like, you're going to have the most fun in this game playing with the squad and communicating and working out how to win, basically, and, you know, strategizing how to win.
That is an excellent point to be made. Didn't even think about the esports.
It'll be interesting to see, though.
Please please add private
well, honestly,
matches.
Yeah, exactly. That's 100% what it needs for this game to have that kind of longevity. If they could only update one piece of content into the game, I would choose it to be private
100%.
matches. No more new starfighters, no new maps. Forget that stuff. Like, let's just get the private matches game mode and enable people to, play the game how they want, have the tournaments, have the esports, have the competitive side of it really just come to the forefront.
Yeah, that will be a game changer if they do add that. That would make the huge, like, Squadrons is perfect for esports. 5v5, boom. You can have dogfights, fleet battles, what have you. But without private matches, it kills the viability of any furthering of the sport. So
yeah. It's interesting as well, like when Battlefront 2 launched, this was one of the biggest requests, basically, apart from everything else that's going on with that game. We're not going to get into that again. But everyone was always asking for private matches again because, Battlefront 2015 had them and so many people use them. I used to use them to film the short films and machinima I used to do. And I know so many people used to do other challenges in them. They used to, just have private matches with their friends, Heroes of Villains stuff, everything, right? Whereas this game... yeah, Battlefront 2 didn't have them. This game still doesn't have them. Maybe that'll change. I hope so.
I hope so too. Now, going forward, let's talk about how does Squadrons affect the future of Star Wars games? So we've had the gigantic game that is Battlefront 2, huge, massive scope, 3 development companies working on it. But it also faced a lot of problems at launch, like we just mentioned there. We've also had Jedi Fallen Order, which is a smaller story-based game. Very fascinating to see. It outperformed all of the expectations that was put on it before launch. So it outsold all of those. Huge success critically as well, but smaller scale game mode. It had the update later on to add the Jedi, what was it, the battle arena?
Yeah, the combat challenges game mode. Yeah.
Yep, there it is. Combat challenges. And we also now have Squadrons, a very niche game, and it's focusing on a subset of the community that was really discovered with the event of Battlefront 2 and how popular that game mode was, at least at launch. But my question is, do you think we will see more smaller scale game modes? Obviously, they don't have much of as huge of an ask in terms of development. They can be developed on a 1 to 2 year cycle like we see that Squadrons was. Do you see the future of Star Wars games being something along like we have more releases of story-based games and then we have like an online game maybe instead of every year we have one every like 3 to 4 years?
It's interesting you say that. I remember us talking about this last time I was on the podcast with Eckhart Slatter. I was talking about kind of how, Squadrons or even Fallen Order potentially impacts or influences the future of Star Wars games. A big thing that I keep talking about is how EA a few months ago said that they're going to double down on Star Wars games in the next few years, meaning I guess they're going to be producing, at least a game a year, right? If they've only released, 4 AAA titles since they took over the license in 2013, which were Battlefront 1, Battlefront 2, Jedi Fallen Order, and Star Wars Squadrons. So 4 games in 7 years isn't necessarily a lot, but when you look at the scope and scale of the games, perhaps it is because,
Battlefront
when it comes
2
to
was
gameplay, map
huge.
building. Exactly. That said, EA does have a vast amount of other studios at their disposal who could be working on other titles. So I think a lot of people hold them accountable to that and being like, hey, where are the other games? We thought you were going to go crazy with this and just, make as much as possible. So it's going to be interesting to see. Like, I've kind of theorized that, yes, with that comment being made about doubling down, that they are going to make a lot of similar games to Squadrons and Fallen Order, perhaps more niche experiences, more, less Battlefront 2-esque, less less of this is the everything Star Wars game with a single player mode, a multiplayer mode with all different types of, across all eras and different types of maps and game modes and Starfighter Assault and the heroes and everything. It's like the everything Star Wars game, whereas Squadrons is just the Starfighter game. Jedi Fallen Order is just the Jedi experience game. It'd be great to see, like, I guess, a bounty hunter style game. I know there were a few that got cancelled over the past few years at other EA studios. Remember, there was one at Visceral that was supposed to be like a Uncharted inspired game. Who knows? Well, do you remember in 2016, I think it was, we got that. There was this video dropped onto the EA Star Wars YouTube channel called EA Star Wars A Look Ahead, I'm pretty sure is what it was called.
Yes.
And it was basically a video that showcased the work of all studios at EA working on Star Wars titles. And there was some stuff in there about Battlefront 2 at DICE. There was stuff in there about Galaxy of Heroes. There was stuff in there about the Old Republic at BioWare. And there was, the Visceral Studios Amy Hennig project. And they kind of showcased that one as well. So that studio got shut down. That was at the Redwood Shores San Francisco office, which is actually the EA headquarters around the world. It's like the main location for EA. So who knows, man? I know we all want more Star Wars experiences. I wonder if it's also a question of their relationship with Lucasfilm. I wonder if Lucasfilm I don't know, did they want to keep producing more and more Star Wars games, knowing that that's more Star Wars lore and content and stories? Are they trying to limit that amount of thing? Are they trying to drip feed it to us so that we don't get tired of Star Wars? Perhaps that's not true. Maybe that's just a stupid idea I'm just, coming up with. But yeah, I hope we see more, man.
So okay, we've got a new Star Wars game coming out. This is all hypothetical. We've got a new Star Wars game coming out, but it's announced that it won't have any single player. What is your reaction to it?
Yeah, I'm fine with that, as long as the multiplayer is tight enough that it has the level of depth that is going to keep me playing and keep me consistent. The same goes for, Jedi Fallen Order had no multiplayer, and sometimes, I wish it did. It'd be great to get a lightsaber versus mode, but at the same time, I'm like, you know what? No, it's fine. It's a fun experience in itself, and it's done really well because of that. It doesn't need multiplayer. What's interesting, I think, about Fallen Order, though, is when you compare it to a game that I think is somewhat similar in design, not necessarily in terms of world building and kind of the Metroidvania style of Jedi Fallen Order, but Ghost of Tsushima, I think, is probably one of the closest, stylistic games to Fallen Order that's come out recently in terms of combat, swordplay, gameplay mechanics, platforming. And even though that's an open world game, whereas, Jedi Fallen Order is kind of half open, half closed kind of thing, I feel like the developers at Respawn should look to Ghost of Tsushima for how they should be building the next Fallen Order, because that game, I think, has taken that whole genre and really evolved it in a way that no one was really expecting, with the different combat stances, the different sword styles, even the open world, the exploration of the game, the fact that you're on this character's journey and you're progressing the story in a way that's almost similar to a Red Dead Redemption style game.
Yeah.
It's really combined it. And also in a few days from now, I don't know when you're posting this, sorry, but I think it's tomorrow even, actually, the Ghost of Tsushima is getting an online co-op multiplayer game mode that's dropping into the game. So, I don't know if that fits in the context of a Star Wars experience, but there's just so many ideas out there. And I think that's part of the reason why some of the Star Wars games in the past have been cancelled at EA, because perhaps the ideas were just too audacious and too kind of grand for them to achieve in the time allocated. Maybe it was just Star Wars has a notorious history of having cancelled games, and a lot of that was to do with around the time LucasArts was being shut down and the whole transition and Disney merger was happening. But I can't say it's hard enough to build a video game, let alone a Star Wars themed video game where everything has to fall into this universe that's pre-existing and there's so many ideals and things to
monitored.
Yeah, exactly. To get approvals, man. I remember I asked Dennis when I got to interview him last year. I asked Dennis Brandville, "What's the hardest thing about your job?" And in one word, "What's the hardest thing about your job?" And he said approvals. I thought that was pretty funny. Getting stuff approved.
Yep. That's understand. Like all of the stories that I've heard internally have been, well, yes, it's wonderful to get to work on a Star Wars license. Like it's a dream job. There are a lot of drawbacks to it. Let's say something along Apex Legends. Like the amount of content and the consistency that they have with Apex Legends is completely different than anything that a Star Wars title could do. Because if let's just say there's a Star Wars Legends, which is Apex Legends but Star Wars, to add, let's say you want to add Han to that, you have to get approvals. You have to make sure, like, what era Han do you want to add to it? Okay, the skin that he has, it has to be canon. Like, there are a lot of different things that you have to take into account when you look at a game like Star Wars or Apex Legends. Like, you have to do certain things.
Yeah, voice lines as well. That's another big one, I think. That'd take, what can he say? What can't he say? What's he capable of doing? What's appropriate for Han to, how should he appropriately act? How is he animated? What's his, all of these things. Perhaps some of what you're saying with, Apex obviously has a live service, which is kind of what Battlefront 2 had with, getting consistent updates into the game. But I think that's somewhat what a game like Galaxy of Heroes has as well. That's the mobile Star Wars game that has copped a lot of criticism, and I know a lot of people aren't necessarily pleased with its development and the lack of transparency between the developers and the game's community. But that game has had a live service for, I think, since 2016, and in a style similar to Apex, I guess, does get new characters, new content drops, new abilities added to the game that change the way it plays.
And it's also not held up to that same standard of canon that a game like Battlefront was held up to. They have continually added updates to it, but it seems like they have two different viewpoints. Like there's the mobile game, which brings in an insane amount of money, and that's probably why they can do whatever they want to, because they are printing money there. But because it is a pay-to-win game.
Okay, yeah. That's true. Why does everything have to be canon, though? This is something I remember us talking about with Ek as well last time. Like, why can't we get a Star Wars game that is just for fun? Like, why does it have to fall into canon? Why can't it just be like another, Force Unleashed style game where it's just ridiculous over the top? You got, the combat game mode in that. Do you remember there was like that fighting battle arena game mode, and you could face off against like all these ridiculous matchups and stuff? Why can't we get a game like that? It's just for fun. Like it's kids playing with toys. That's what it is. That's the game I want. Still
100% with you there. My goodness, it would be so much fun. Like towards the end, I'd say Battlefront really pushed into that. Like they were able to catch their stride, and like I think it would have been awesome to see if they were able to get another year of support into Battlefront. Where it would have been there. But like I love beating the crap out of Darth Vader with BB-8. Like that's amazing. Like so cool.
Agree. Yeah, it's fine. Like why not? Why not, right? It's an experience that you were never going to have, and now that you've had it, you're like, yeah, it's fun. Why wouldn't I want more of this style of thing? It's ridiculous, but it doesn't need to be canon. Like you're playing a sandbox game, right? It's supposed to push the boundaries and give you a new experience.
That is a fantastic point to be made.
And let's save the canon stuff for the story-based games, or even for Squadrons. Like that's a multiplayer tight game set in a specific era at a specific time in the Star Wars timeline with specific starfighters. Like that's fine. I'm cool with that, right? Jedi Fallen Order, same thing. It's a Jedi experience set after Order 66 and the Clone Wars, and it's a single-player story. Why can't we have a sandbox that we can just, have fun in?
Yeah, I know with Battlefront 2015, when they were in the development of that, and with the continued support with the Season Pass, their response to a lot of the requests were we can't add that hero because it's not canon to the original trilogy. And I think that was a detriment to a lot of the stuff people wanted added. But even though, like, you look at that and you're like, well, it launched and you could have stormtroopers without helmets. That's not canon.
No.
You have Palpatine on Jakku, which that's not really canon. He was never there in like an official sense. So
that's true. That was the first video I made about Battlefront. The first Star Wars video I ever made was a public service announcement to all Battlefront players to wear your helmet in Battlefront. That was the video.
It was such a huge issue. Like, it's funny to look at it now, like being through Battlefront 2's controversy, and like I love Battlefront 2015. Like, it was such a fun time. I love that era. And it's great to see when like the biggest controversy was that stormtroopers didn't have helmets and not like a huge loot box thing.
I know, right? It's so true. It's like a matter of authenticity, not like, oh, they're stealing our money.
Yeah, simpler times.
Yeah.
That's all for this episode. Thank you so much for listening to UPLINK Podcast, the number one podcast that covers everything from Battlefront to Squadrons, past, present, and future Star Wars games. This is the rebrand of the Battlefront Podcast. We thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to support the show as we continue moving forward, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/UPLINK where you'll get an exclusive podcast, UPLINK Plus. At the $1 a month level, you'll be able to get Discord exclusive features, as well as guide the content covered on the podcast and the show. And at the $5 a month level, you'll be able to get access to UPLINK Plus, possibly, depending on how we run things, a weekly exclusive show. You'll at least get 2 episodes of it a month, and I'm thinking we'll up that to weekly soon. But so far, I'm in the throes of editing 2 episodes for UPLINK Plus. One with Andrew, Bombastic, guest of today's show. Talk a bit about the inside details of creating content for YouTube. And we also have another one that is with Mark, Split Screen, and Ethan, Danger Cat. That's a great way to support the show. It helps us to keep the lights on here and continue offering the show. A great free way to support the show is by leaving a review on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, basically anywhere you can leave a review. It's super, super helpful. Helps us, gives us feedback, and supports the show. Another great way, free, is just sharing the show with your friends. It's greatly appreciated there. Also, we're so close to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. We are, at the time of this recording, 40 away, and we're almost there. Goal for 2020 was to get to 1,000 subscribers, and I think we can pull it off. We also stream every Saturday on our YouTube channel, and I believe the plan so far, in November or December, do a daily stream on our Twitch and YouTube channel. So keep an eye out for that. Definitely going to be some fun there. A link to Andrew's channel will be in the description of this podcast. As always, thanks for listening, and may the Force be with you.